Well, welcome. We'll get started. Thanks for joining us today. We're glad to see folks hopping on and looking forward to a good conversation. This is Making Our Democracy Work, information about a career in election administration. And this is hosted by the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. And in large part, we're here to talk about our certificate in election administration. So I want to say hello. My name is Kate Semino, and I'm here with my colleague, Kristen Fabin, who's also joined by Goldie Gopher, although I don't know that Goldie was available to join the webinar today, but we're gonna be your host today, kind of walking you through this conversation and moving through your questions. A little bit about your Zoom interface. I imagine everybody is pros at Zoom at this point, but there should be a vertical line in the middle of your screen that you can move either left or right to change the size of the video faces, our images here, and the size of the slide deck, depending on what you need to do. We are also going to be using the chat and the Q&A button. First, we're going to use the chat, and you can get to that by clicking in the bottom center of your screen. The goals of today's session first is to just mainly share information about the CEA, which is what we call our certificate in election administration. This is a fully online certificate. Our goal is to help determine whether this is the right program for you and if this is the right time. We're also going to discuss, primarily with our alumni of the program and faculty who are on the call today, career paths and job opportunities in the field of election administration. And we'll have tons of time to get to all your questions, so we are looking forward to that. Okay, first we want to know, where are you located? We want to get a sense for who's with us today. So we're going to ask you to open your chat, and you should be able to get to that by clicking in the center of your bottom of your screen and go to your chat. And we'd like you to just type the name of your state or your country if you're outside the US. Oops, we'll stay there. Kristen, can you read off what we have so far?
We have a lot of people from Minnesota.
We're getting some echo on you, Kristen. I'm not sure why.
A lot of people from Minnesota, Iowa, DC, Kansas, California, Wisconsin. A lot of Minnesota, and then some spread across the rest of the country.
Perfect. Good. Our next prompt for everybody is, what are you most hoping to learn from today's session? You could write that in the chat also. What are you most hoping to learn? There'll be plenty of time for specific questions later, so you don't need to go into super detail, but we're just kind of looking for a sense of what you're hoping to learn. So as you do that, we'll give you another minute if folks are still thinking about your response. What I really want to take some time to do is thank and welcome our panelists who have joined us here today. And we have 3 alumni of the certificate program, as well as 1 of our faculty members. And I am thrilled to have them with us. And we're going to be able to spend a lot of time chatting with them. So you can see here the folks that have joined us, and I'd like to invite each of them to just take just a minute to say what they do currently in the field of elections and what their connection is to this program. So Tammy, would you be willing to start? Tammy is our faculty member who is here today. Tammy teaches our data analysis for election administration course. As long as you're off mute, take it away, Tammy.
Great, thank you so much. Well, it's wonderful to see names of individuals that I know in the chat, and of course to share the panelists today. So I am originally from Minnesota, so I was thrilled to be asked to participate in this program back in 2017. I was a former local election official in Maricopa County, Arizona for more than a decade and served as the federal compliance officer. And then I was asked by President Obama to serve on the Presidential Commission of Election Administration. And that's at the time when I kind of moved away from Arizona, moved out to DC in the Maryland area, and started a job at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Now I serve as a senior advisor to the elections team at the Democracy Fund.
Thanks so much, Tammy. How about Mark? Would you like to go next?
Sure. My name's Mark Chapin. I'm located in Minneapolis. My role is the director of a department for Hennepin County. And for those that are not familiar with our county seat is Minneapolis. We have about 1.2 million residents in the county. I'm more of an executive manager for elections. I'm the county auditor, which by statute is the responsible authority, but I do have an absolute expert as my elections manager. Her name's Jenny Gelms. But I support that team, and I manage a larger department. It's about 300 staff members, and elections one component, but the most important component.
Thank you, Mark. David, how about you go next?
Hi, everybody. My name is David Kuennen. I'm a cybersecurity specialist at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within DHS. Security is so important to us, it's in our name twice. I work there on stakeholder engagement and resource development. I'm relatively new to CISA. I was, prior to April, I was working at the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, a small federal agency that supports the states in administering elections, where I was a senior advisor. And prior to that, a senior researcher. I was the project lead on the 2018 Election Administration and Voting Survey. If you know what the EVES are, you're probably in the right place. Before joining the EAC, I worked in international development. I was very fortunate to have a career that took me around the world a bit, where I focused primarily on elections. So that's supporting election management bodies in other countries on how to run elections, observing elections, and related democracy assistance programming. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And Heather.
Hey, everybody. My name's Heather. I am also originally from Minnesota, and I was looking for a career change back in 2015 when I was applying to get my master's in public policy from the Humphrey School. I had previously worked, like many Minnesotans, for Target Corporation right out of undergrad, and then worked for a nonprofit blood center in St. Paul, Memorial Blood Centers, but wanted to get back into the field of elections. Specifically, actually, I met Jenny Gelms at an event, and I was like, what, this is a career field? I want to do this. So applied to get my master's in public policy because that made the most sense to me at that time. And as fate would have it, they were starting off their CEA program right at that time as well. So I did my master's in public policy at the same time as I did the CEA. And now here I am living in Denver, working for the City and County of Denver Elections Division as the Voter Services Manager.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I know that these are all active election professionals who are working currently, and it is a very busy time, as you all know, in the field of elections. And so thank you all for making the time. I know our attendees are excited to connect with you. We're going to do a little poll just because fun. We want to find out more about you and who's with us here, and that'll help our team respond to and anticipate some of the questions that you may have. So we are going to push this out. Get ready. You can start to vote. This is about you. I feel like there should be some like music right now, kind of like while we're doing this. If you're just joining or just catching up, we're doing a quick poll here. Nearly all of you have voted or responded. I'm seeing kind of an even split between folks who work in elections full time, people who perhaps have volunteered as an election judge or poll worker, and those who are just generally interested in this field. As far as education level, we've got the majority of people have completed an undergraduate degree, about 48%. And then the next highest is 38% of folks on today have completed a graduate degree. As far as what best describes you, we've got a couple people looking at coursework this fall or spring, but more people just kind of looking to learn more about this program and about careers in elections is the majority of folks here today. So this is good to know. Thank you. Good, polling is closed. All right. Awesome. Good, so from now on, we're actually gonna close out that chat box because we wanna direct all the questions to the Q&A box. You're gonna find that down at the bottom of your screen, bottom of the center, and that'll help our team really sort through the questions a little bit more effectively and kind of keep the questions categorized so we can get through them. So again, any questions this point forward, just blast us with as many as you want, but you can send them to the Q&A box at the bottom there. Good. Let's just do, I'm going to spend about 5 minutes just kind of going into some details about the certificate. And the idea here is to give you an overview of some of the aspects of the certificate. We are going to buzz through this in about 5 minutes or so, get to a few of these big questions that you have about the program itself, but then we're really going to transition over to our alumni and faculty who are with us and go deeper on the field of election administration and about what the certificate a little bit more broadly provides for you long term. All of us here today believe that elections are a key and vital part of our democracy, and the field is was already facing some unprecedented challenges before we hit COVID-19, and now we are in really a new world of election administration. This is a field that has a large body of retiring baby boomers, if you will, and tons of opportunity for new folks to come into this field. So if there's nothing else that you walk away from this webinar with, we hope that you take that this is really an important field, a field that has jobs, that has career paths, and we are going to get more into that with our alumni panel. But basically, you know, kind of the basics of what you'll gain from this certificate is a deeper dive into the complex and changing laws, regulations, technology around elections. There's aspects of accessibility and equity that are really embedded in this field that you'll get a much deeper understanding of and connection to kind of the current thinking around these challenges and opportunities. The learning community of peers and mentors in the field, this is big, and I will prompt our guest today to talk a little bit more about this as well. So as far as a career in this field, you know, how are you going to be tapping into peers and mentors and faculty to be helping you make those connections? And then again, there is a demand. There's a demand for experienced elections and voting professionals, and this certificate is designed to prepare you to be able to respond to that demand professionally. So a little bit more about the certificate. This is a fully online program. It does not have any in-person components, weekends, that kind of thing. This is fully online. It's national. The coursework can also be taken from international locations, as I think David did for a couple semesters. Maybe he could talk about that later. The faculty in this field are not just folks who like to think about why elections are important. They are people who have worked in and do work in the field of elections. So these are practitioners. These are folks who are really hands-on doing the work, elbow deep in what the work involves and what the challenges are. The coursework is practical and applied. Again, we're not doing philosophy of why democracy matters. We're doing like, okay, how do you actually implement democracy? How do you make democracy literally happen in a certain municipality at a certain time? Importantly, the coursework is offered at either the undergraduate or the graduate level. And I know those of you here are kind of in different places. This is fine. So you would be doing undergraduate coursework for the certificate if you were had not yet completed a bachelor's degree, or you can continue to do the undergraduate level certificate courses if you have a bachelor's degree. That is fine. The advantage to doing graduate level is that if you are completing this as part of a graduate degree, credits toward a graduate degree, of course, you'd be doing graduate level. Another thing to consider is if you've completed a bachelor's and you think that at any point you might want to pursue a master's degree, you're probably going to want to do the graduate level coursework. Then you can transfer those credits into a graduate program at any point in the future. If you do the full certificate and complete it, that is 12 credits. Most people finish this over 2 to 4 semesters. You can also take individual courses without applying for the full program. So this is a nice option too for someone who might just want to try it out, who might just want to take one course they're really interested in, might just want to explore whether this is an area of interest for you, to just take an individual course without having to apply and get accepted for the full program. You can then put that course toward the full certificate at any point in the future if you choose to. Lots more on our website. If you haven't yet been there and noodled around, please go and check it out. There's a lot more information there as well. Here are the courses that are offered this fall. I know most of you who responded said this was not, you were more here kind of for general information, but just to give you a sense, we've got one of the core courses, Survey of Election Administration, taught by Amy Wilson from Colorado. The other 2 courses offered this fall are part of our elective options, data analysis that Tammy teaches, and Introduction to Election Security. I will say that as you look into the deeper list of courses on the website, this election security is an issue that we are digging deeper into and developing more courses as we speak on different parts of election security in the US. Here's a question that many people brought with them today is about the cost. If you're a University of Minnesota student or will be taking this as part of your U of M coursework, you're going to be paying your standard tuition rate. If you're not a U of M student, but you're just in the certificate, if you apply to and are accepted to do the certificate at either the undergraduate or graduate level, you can see the costs there. Something to consider is many of you, if you're working in elections, there may be some employer tuition benefits that you could tap into, so definitely explore that. And we also have a group discount. If you're working for a city, a county or state office or a city office that might have a sufficient number of folks who would be doing this certificate all at the same time, you should look into this, kind of a little discount club. So you could get a 20% discount. I think if it's 10 or more, it's even a higher discount than that. So please look into it. If you know of folks already that are your coworkers who are participating in the certificate right now, and now you're looking into it, you guys could kind of get in together. They will start getting the discount too if sufficient numbers of folks from your team start to going through here. Kristen, do you think there are any questions that have come in so far that kind of fit in this, these basics before we start talking bigger picture?
Yeah, I think that one question a few people asked were about admissions. If there are any prerequisites for the 2 different program levels.
Yeah, and good question, thank you. So that information is going to be covered in pretty good detail on our website. So I do want to encourage you to go and check that out as well. The as far as the prerequisites that are required, I don't want to go too deep on that on the webinar today, just because that is also available to you on the website. You can be sure to check that out, and then we are always available over email to respond to any more specific questions that you have going forward. Other questions that have come up?
A good majority have been answered, and then there are other more specifics that I think the panelists will cover in their discussion.
Awesome. Good. Well, I'm going to end the slides and just get us back to real conversation. So please continue to use the Q&A button, and then we're going to dig in with our guests that are on here today, our alumni and faculty. So let's start. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to stop my slides, and let's start with Tammy, actually. You know, what would you say to folks who were like, you know, I'm going to just work in the field. Why would I really need to do the certificate? Why would it be beneficial to consider pursuing something like this?
Yeah, so I think that certificate has a couple of major advantages. One is for those who are already in the field, it allows you the opportunity to kind of contextualize your own experience and learn from what's happening in other states, as well as learn on the academic side of things. Because oftentimes in state and local government, we get kind of siloed into our own experience. And the certificate really allows an additional level of exposure that you may not get otherwise if you don't attend national conferences, or if you don't have a really robust state conference where a lot of national voices are being brought in. So it really allows for that ability to learn from your peers around the country, as well as from other academicians that have been working in the space. That's for someone who's already in the space. I think for myself, it also allows us to reach into the pool of young talent and give them the opportunity to understand that this is a really vibrant career path. I wish I had known it when I was in college. It took me a good 15 years or so before I stumbled upon it, literally. And so I think that those are a couple of the big advantages. And one last piece to that is, when you're thinking about it, if you're a current local election official or state official and you're trying to think, well, how do I pitch this to, to my purse string holders that this is an added value, it really is an opportunity for you to find ways to gain efficiencies in your own office, as well as better ways to serve your electorate. And those two things, particularly if you take my class and we talk about how to capture information and data on how to tell that story well, is something that I think is really, really beneficial. If you can turn around and kind of exemplify, how and why you were able to save money, but still service the voters as best as possible.
Good. Heather, what would you add? Anything?
So yeah, I was obviously looking to get into the field of elections. So the program was perfect for me at that time. I had served as an election judge, but I had no idea how to get into the field otherwise. I think historically in my experience and the people around me, I knew it was hard to get into municipal or state jobs, and I wasn't sure what to do. So enrolling in this program, getting connected with people, Doug Chapin introduced me to Amber McReynolds, who was the then director of elections for Denver, and she had an internship opportunity for me. So I was able to go intern with her office in the summer of 2016, get some really good experience. They had a primary going on, so I got to work on that. I interned with the city of Minneapolis elections that fall as well, which was, that more coincided with my master's in public policy program, less so on the CEA program, but it worked really well with all the coursework that I was doing. So I worked in Minneapolis during the general in 2016, and then ended up back in Denver with a full-time job offer after I graduated. So it was, the program itself was perfect for introducing me to the field, understanding what was going on nationwide. Obviously, a lot of you are from Minnesota. You know how well elections run in Minnesota, but what does every other state do? Because every other state is different. So I took that opportunity in the program to study what other states were doing. I found Colorado's mail ballot model very interesting, and that's what led me here to learn more about it here.
Thanks, Heather. Related question for Mark or David to jump in. Tammy mentioned, I wish I had known about this career earlier. So if you were to end the sentence, election administration, a career in election administration is a great career for people who, what? People who like or are interested in fill in the blank.
Go ahead, David.
Great question. I'm not going to fill in the blank, but I'm going to tell a story that answers your question. So when I was right out of college, I worked on a couple campaigns, and I mean, there's no shortage of young people who get involved in politics, right? You want to change the world, you want to do something important, you go drive somewhere, you volunteer for a campaign, you hope to get a job. I was fortunate enough to work on a campaign that went into a recount. This was a state 2.5 million votes cast. This wasn't Florida 2000. It wasn't your race in Minnesota, but we were in one phase of the recount. We were up by my candidate was up by 12 votes out of 2.5 million cast. And I was sent to observe on behalf of my candidate, one tiny county, the canvass. They were doing the recount, and they were canvassing the questionable ballot. And I was, 24-year-old kid, and I noticed something just about the minutia of what they were doing, and I intervened. And my intervention saved my candidate 1 vote when we were up by 12. If you like the minutia of rules, procedures, election, just if you're into the geekery of it, if you like the small things and making a marginal difference, this is an incredible career field. If you want to make your voter experience better, you want to lower your provisional ballot rejection rates, you want to do things that serve voters and serve American democracy, if you're into that, this is a great field for you.
So Kate, I agree with everything David said. A good story, David. What I would suggest is that historically elections, at least at the local level, have been kind of clerk roles, and sort of people stumbled into elections, but they were like the city clerk or the county clerk. But today, it's become a true profession. And, I listed some aspects of this profession. It's clearly there's a leadership role. There's a technical aspect. David knows there's an IT and cyber aspect. I'm an attorney. There's a legal component. We're always talking with our attorneys. There's a policy component. There's always legislative changes and interest from elected officials, because this is kind of in their wheelhouse. With part-time staff, there's a training and teaching component, especially poll judges, poll workers, supervisory skills, and then finally communications in terms of marketing, social media, outreach. And so it's become a multifaceted role that, again, traditionally was a very narrow kind of governmental clerk role. So, and then the other thing I would throw out on the program is, as far as my interest, I think you'd have a leg up in terms of being hired to work in any area of elections if you have the certificate behind you.
Yeah, let's say a little bit more about that, and then I want to dig in to some more concrete about what are the courses actually like, how much interaction is there, time commitment. I want to get into kind of more of the nitty gritty. But first, let's talk about, why would a person, what does it give a person to complete this coursework, to do this certificate, rather than just to work in the field without it? What kind of value does it provide, not just to the individual, but to your employer, that you have completed this type of coursework? And anyone can go. Just kind of wave at me, because I can see you if you want to talk. Heather.
Hey.
Heather, and then David.
Well, I know Tammy's on the call, but I like to plug her class about data analysis, because I think this is probably the most helpful class that you can have, because election officials have so much data at their hands, whether it's demographic data about their voters and their how frequently they vote or not, versus where they return. Well, in Colorado, like, where do our voters return their ballots? What drop box are they using the most? How many are returning their ballot by the mail, etc. This information really helps you drive policy changes that you find that you need. And Tammy's class really gives you data to work with, real data, that you can practice with, and then help you develop pitches that you need. Because I know I work in a really large county, and we have the benefit of having a pretty sizable elections office, but many smaller offices, you are the jack of all trades, and you have to be able to do all of that. So if you're in a small county that has 5 or less people, you need to know how to do all of those things. So that data analysis piece, I think, was super helpful.
Good, thank you. David, what do you think is worthwhile?
Well, just hitting on the same point that Tammy made about the peer learning. There's, and the kind of the diffuse nature or decentralized nature of American elections. You in these courses, you're gonna meet folks who are running elections in other parts of the country, or live in different parts of the country and have experiences of how elections are run there, and it's incredibly important to know that it's, you know, that it's different, that it's possible to be different if you're looking to make change in your own jurisdiction. Specifically, I found for my career, the elections in the law course was invaluable. I mean, I read statute all the time, domestically, international statute, and I have to interpret it, use it for my job. But I'm not a lawyer. I didn't have much background in the law. And while this was not a legal course, it wasn't election law course, it was elections in the law. I found just one semester worth of digging into that topic to be incredibly valuable in my ability to just kind of be more election law savvy. I'm not a lawyer, but I can talk to lawyers better. I can interface with them better. I can read draft legislation better. I mean, it helps me all the time. And then just final point is just elections are so different in so many in different states. I've been working in elections for over 15 years, and I'm still learning things about the field. So if you're new to the space, expertise in the space, or if you're already come to the program with specialization in the space, you can learn more. I mean, I learned about some federal statute I'd never heard of that turned out to be really important in a meeting that I was in, not just last week. I mean, you have to be a lifelong learner if you want to work in the election space. There's always more expertise to get. And this program is a way to give you a dedicated 4 or 5 semesters worth of thinking about one topic from multiple angles.
If I could jump in there as well, I think that David raises a lot of really important points, but one of the things that is so attractive to this field, when you talk about reading draft legislation, one of the things that the professionalization of the field of election administration has sought to do is raise the voices of state and local election officials in the rules under which they have to conduct elections. So previously, we'll say 20 years ago, when I started in this space, it was, we conduct the election under the rules of the state, and we aren't going to weigh in on those. We're not going to say how it affects our voters. We're not going to collect data on what those impacts are, and that has changed dramatically. So more and more state and local officials are, in fact, having their associations testify on behalf of the education of what is in the legislation. It's not necessarily lobbying for or against something, but educating our legislatures at both the state and federal levels on what the impact is of the rules that are being reviewed and codified. And that is an incredibly huge responsibility and undertaking, and it's not something that you often get in many professions, to really have the opportunity to say, you know what, I helped draft federal legislation that's going to improve the voting process for millions of Americans for years to come. And not that that'll happen to everyone on a regular basis, but when you are provided that kind of opportunity, having the background that the certificate provides you makes you prepared and positions you in a way that you, I think, are able to do that in a much more effective manner.
Hey, Tammy, thank you. While I've got you here unmuted, do you want to speak a little bit about your format of your course? And we can transition a little bit to examples of kind of how the courses are structured. I know some people at this point have had different experiences with online learning, with distance learning. Tell us about your course, and then other alumni that are here, are there any differences with some of the other instructors? How much interaction is there? Is it live? Is it recorded? Is there live chat? Kind of how does it work?
Yeah, so when I put together my course back in 2016 into 17, I will be honest, I wasn't sure how I was going to maintain that connection with the students because of the fact that it was solely online, and we had a handful of webinars scheduled for that live interaction, and that kind of concerned me. So in my class, at the beginning of every unit, there is a pre-recorded kind of mini presentation by me. Those of you who have heard about my my reliance upon PowerPoint or my my reliance on way too many PowerPoint slides, it will not surprise you that I start every week with a small PowerPoint. But I do think that it's important to kind of give a brief overview of the unit that's being discussed, and kind of contextualize it into why are we talking about this in this class? What are the high level things that you want to take away by the end of it? And it also kind of is a way of setting the stage for the week. So that comes, that's done on the very first day. There's also discussions, and often in my class, the content kind of pivots around daily news and the information that's available out on electionline.org. And so we'll have a topic, say it's around ADA compliance or making sure that polling places are accessible for voters with disabilities and that sort of thing. And it'll say, try and find an article about this in the news recently, and then there's a discussion, and I weigh in, and the group kind of discusses things, more of a kind of open forum. And that is graded in my class as well. So it's expected that you not only make a post, but you reply to other students' posts. And then, as I mentioned, we do have a couple of different webinars that occur, throughout the course of time when it is, in fact, a real live, kind of interaction. Well, real live in this new Zoom world that we all live in. So it's a little more prevalent. The other thing that I would say is that I know for myself, I always try and make myself available to students, whether it's, through email or text messages or Twitter or however. And I have had students reach out to me using pretty much every social platform that's available. So that's, yet another way. And I think that the instructors really try and make themselves available. Sometimes that can be difficult in an election cycle as we near the election, but in general, I think that that's kind of a combination of pre-recorded, some live information, and then the actual content and modules that are worked through.
Thanks, Tammy. And maybe we can start with Mark here. Mark, what would you add in terms of the course format, interaction with your classmates and faculty?
Well, I didn't work with Tammy, but I took a number of courses from Doug Chapin, and some folks thought we were brothers because we have the same last name.
Well, I mean, that's fair.
We're probably, all Chapins in the US are related, so probably somewhere along the line we're related. But what I liked about Doug was, and he was very clear on this, and he followed through on it, is he recognizes that most of us are working jobs, and we also have families, and he would say sometimes life gets in the way. Just keep me informed. And so I really appreciated the flexibility that he gave us when we were maybe struggling with a deadline or needed more time. We just gave him a heads up, and he was very generous in being flexible around that. So, but I would say even to today, I can send a message to him. I think he's in DC right now, and he'll respond. And I've asked him with the pandemic questions, and so he was generous with his time during the course and since I've graduated.
Thanks. Heather or David, anything you'd add about the course format? Or how you kind of balanced it with life and work, and kind of how do you fit this into your life?
It was interesting for me. I was doing my master's in public policy program at the same time, and a teaching assistant for classes, in-person classes at the Humphrey while I was doing the program. So and then also interning with Minneapolis elections. So I had like 4 jobs at once. A lot of us in the field of elections are type A organized control freaks. And so some of the courses were very structured, and you had to follow them at the pace that you were going through the course, because you had discussions on Thursdays, for example. So that structure at times was very helpful. And then I think, like David mentioned, the elections in the law class was a little bit more flexible, which was good for that content because it gave you time to digest more of that information. If you're not a lawyer and you need to take more time to read, Supreme Court cases, because it takes you a little while longer to get through that language, because it can be rough sometimes. So I appreciated that program did have flexibility like that, but also sometimes offered a lot of structure to help you get through it.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I guess, yeah, re-emphasizing the point about peer learning. I mean, there's the content is incredible. You know, Tammy and Doug and other of the instructors are some, you know, premier experts in the field. They've cultivated really quality content. But the discussions are great. I mean, one of my favorite things about the course was hearing from local election officials or state election officials from other states with experiences that I didn't have. So diving, you know, we were required to give two comments a week on other people's posts or something like that. In certain topics, I would find myself, you know, 10 or 12 comments long, just asking people questions about how our election. It can't be that you reconcile ballots that way. That's not possible. So that's one thing. And then, I mean, the flexibility of the program was really beneficial to me. I much prefer in-person learning, but I don't live in Minneapolis. I took one semester of this course. I was overseas in Pakistan, actually. The rest of the semesters, I think I did in Washington, D.C. or partially in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. And so the flexibility was really helpful. Also, I think it took me 4 years to get through the program. There were certain semesters I had too much work going on or different things in my life. But yeah, really benefited from the flexibility that it offered.
Is there anything you'd add about just the relationship building between your classmates and people you get to know through your courses over the time that you're enrolled in these courses? What kind of opportunity is there to kind of connect and build a little community?
Sure. I mean, I've talked to former classmates. I've asked them questions. I've talked to former instructors. I think I've asked Doug and Tammy on multiple occasions, like when I was in a position to hire somebody at a junior level, I'd say, hey, you got any whip smart kids in your class this semester? I mean, there have been times when I've definitely reached out to my the faculty and the fellow classmates.
Mark, what would you add?
Kate, I would add, I can't remember which class it was in, but there were opportunities to have cohorts, and I agree with David. I have, even though we've not personally met, I have friends in Madison, Wisconsin, and Kansas, and DC that I could text from my iPhone right now if I needed something or some information. So there were opportunities that not only to access national experts as far as the teachers, but to create these relationships nationally that you would never have the opportunity to do that absent the program.
That's good. I'm going to answer a few of the technical questions that came through, but I'll prompt our panelists here to start thinking about some of the equity issues embedded in the field of election administration. Kind of not only voting outreach to all sorts of communities, including communities of color, communities who may not have traditionally been engaged in voting access, but also diversifying the field of election administration, which I think is a big question. So I'm just going to prompt you to think about that a little bit. We'll come back to that question. We do have a question come in about, given this presidential election and the pandemic, is it recommended to start the program this fall or wait until the spring? You know, I think that depends on your availability to commit to the program. We're running it, we're doing it. We've got coursework, we've got students, we've got people already enrolled. I mean, it's happening for sure on our end. If it fits into your life right now and you're able to do this, please do. It will be, I think, a good time to connect with others to talk about some of these big issues. And I anticipate that in the chat and in the relationships that start to form, there's going to be a lot of talk about what's going on in present times and a good chance to connect to those folks to talk. You know, our instructors are committed to this program and have been teaching for many semesters. So we're confident in their ability to continue to connect with students. There is also a question about financial aid. There is a little bit about that on our website. We can also address those questions with you individually over email. We do not have financial aid or scholarships that we at the Humphrey School have for this program in particular. There aren't any, say, special scholarships. There may be some grants and loans that you may be able to apply for by filling out the FAFSA. I would say just kind of dig a little bit deeper, email us, and we'll kind of work with you on that. What would you say about about aspects of kind of voter outreach, voter engagement, but also diversification of the field of election administration. Anyone want to jump in on that one, Tammy?
Yeah, and actually one other thing on that question of when is the right time, I think you cover that really well, that it's always kind of subject to what bandwidth you personally have. But I will say that I know this is going to be the first fall I'm teaching my course, and I've had many students, I tried to lay it out because I'm a former election official on the timeline of how elections are conducted. And I have had many students say that it kind of fell right in line with their own planning for the elections. And because there were so many resources available, I've had election officials say they use the tools in our class to lobby their local boards to get additional equipment with the tools that they learned in class. So you can't always tell exactly what the outcome will be or how helpful it will be. But I certainly say if you have the time, that it's always good to take that first step and get started. And with that given, as you mentioned, these are very interesting times we live in. There's a lot to talk about. And the courses, I know from my course this fall, it's going to be changing as we go. I'm going to, and we did it this last spring, because I do so much work on vote by mail with the Postal Service this last spring, a lot of it was very fluid. And I think that that's something that is also a good thing for individuals to know, that given what this election is going to potentially play out to be, it'll be a good time to have those kind of conversations, both with faculty as well as with others. And then to your question about diversity, we know, so Democracy Fund did a survey starting 3 years ago, and one came out last year called the Stewards of Democracy, and it's all about local election officials. And we know that the average local election official is a 50 to 60-year-old white woman making, around between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. We know that many people will be retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. And we certainly want to make sure that our field and profession is more reflective of our population. So attracting younger people, attracting people who are of the communities in which they'll be serving is really, really important. And I think that it's not only a question of, as you mentioned, outreach, and voter education, but also making sure that those in leadership positions, those in decision-making positions, are in fact of that community that they serve.
Thank you, Tammy. Do others have anything to add on that topic, or other stuff that's come to mind?
Hey, one of the thoughts I had is this program gave me the opportunity to do a kind of a deep dive into the divide in terms of who participates in elections. And I hadn't really considered that in my role of supporting my division. And what I learned was that depending upon the minority group versus white voters, there can be a fairly substantial divide and disparity between who votes and who does not. But what I also learned was that if a voter is registered to vote, the disparity gap drops down to around 2% of who actually votes. And so one of the things that stimulated me in doing that research was I learned a little bit about publicly accessible computers and kiosks. And I actually went down to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and looked at their setup in their library system. And as a result of that opportunity and learning about this in the program, we're doing the same thing in Minneapolis with the Hennepin County Library System, where we have publicly accessible computers so that people can register. And we know there's a digital divide when it comes to both, well, as far as equity issues. So I guess the point I'm making is that I think there are a lot of equity opportunities. And as Tammy points out, the people that I see I see younger white women right now, but we have some diversity, but I think the opportunities are really there. And what she said is really true, that we do want our elections officials to represent the community that they serve. And so I guess, again, I wouldn't be in this place with this program. And now that we're in a pandemic, we're actually sending out CARES Act grants to hire nonprofits to serve as navigators in areas that are underrepresented, so people can navigate an absentee ballot world that they don't know anything about, they've never participated in. We're doing everything we can to drive people away from the polling places. And I say that just in the sense of a safety perspective. We want them to vote, but we want them to vote safely. And again, if I hadn't had that background, I don't know that I would have thought about as many of the options that are available today.
So I think it would be safe to say that if folks attending today are interested in some of the equity and access issues around elections and voting, that is that's a lens and a topic that many election administrators are eager to be talking more about and would be eager to be welcoming folks in who are interested in that topic.
Absolutely.
No, that's good. That's good. Let's touch on, oh, I know what I was going to ask. I was going to ask because I think sometimes when you're interested in an area and just starting to kind of learn about what types of careers and issues are really front of mind in that field, it helps to have a list of websites, newsletters, resources, folks on Twitter who are good to follow and read and pay attention to. So if we want to brainstorm a little bit, I will type these in the chat. I'm going to start with Tammy's organization, which is called Democracy Fund. I'm just going to put that here. I'm assuming folks can start to see that pop up in the chat, right? What other, and then I think electionline.org was mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. Election Line on Wednesdays, on Thursdays has Election Line Weekly, and there are job postings as well.
Hey.
So that's specific to election officials.
Election Line week, wait, Thursdays it's called what? Election?
You could just go to electionline.org.
Okay.
And there's a weekly, and then there's the daily news and other resources.
So the Thursday's post includes job listings.
Mm-hmm.
Great. What other sources do you go to? David, what do you use when you're keeping up on either people or newsletters or sites that you go to?
Sure. Well, I highly recommend you follow David_Kuennen on Twitter. He's very prolific, mildly humorous. Actually, not very prolific nor humorous. But the definitely Election Line. I mean, Doug Chapin likes to joke that if you read Election Line every morning for a month, you're going to know more about election administration, election policy than 80% of the people who work in the space. I mean, every article they link to for a month. It's a really incredible resource. I literally read it every day. The National Conference of State Legislators, they do all kinds of things on their website comparing election policy and procedure across the 50 states and DC. They have a monthly newsletter called The Canvas that's really pretty good that I like. Just know that when you're reading their website, their audience is state legislators and legislative staff, right? They're very much looking at policy, not necessarily administration. There's a national listserv that Rick Hassan is a law professor out in California, runs that you should get on. He basically compiles the news clippings every day, sends it around.
What's his name again?
Rick Hassan, Hasen. Anyways, there's a number of listservs like that, but he's probably one of the most prolific.
Heather, how about you? What sites or people do you follow?
I think David said everything I would say. Doug Chapin, though, also has a email blast that he does almost daily, and I read that one. Yeah, I think David covered up everything.
What about you, Mark?
Well, I would throw out the Pew Trust. They've got a lot of research studies on there. It's probably not academic, but I like 538.com.
Good. I'm just getting, do you look at Doug's, is it the Election Academy blog that he does, or is it something else that you follow, Heather? Just trying to make sure I.
Let me look real quick.
Director of Elections. Let's see. Well, I'm going to put Doug's, I'm just going to put his, kind of his website. And then the Pew Research was what you mentioned, Mark?
Yes.
On the research side, I would also say MIT's Election Data Science Lab, or MEDSL, so MEDSL, or just follow Charles Stewart and you'll get all the good stuff, and that's at Charles Stewart. the 3rd. Also, the Center for Technology and Civic Life, or CTCL, has a newsletter called Electricity that they put out. And that tends to highlight, they like to focus on education and support and training for medium to smaller sized jurisdictions. And so they tend to highlight some of the ingenious things that are happening in some of those smaller offices around the country. So that's a great way to kind of keep tabs on what's happening in other jurisdictions.
Awesome. Oh, this is great. I like this list. Thanks for sharing. I think that gets us close to the end here. I'm just going to share my screen one more time and invite you to join us on August 13th. We've got a webinar that's more of kind of a learning and discussion session with some speakers, and it's on election security. It's called Security for Whom. It's about cybersecurity, election validation and audits, healthy polling places, kind of the different ways to think about like who's security. Are we looking at security for people, for information, for data? Kind of how are we thinking about this upcoming election cycle? And you can get to that by going to this website and registering. And then again, there's lots more information on our website. You can also email us at cspg@umn.edu. A lot of the questions that come up about the certificate are really personal, depending on your circumstances, your kind of where you're at in your degree, what you're looking for, and we're happy to talk you through that. And we want to thank you all for joining, and especially our alumni and faculty for joining us on what is, of course, always a busy day. And we're really grateful for your time and your energy always toward supporting this program. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Nice to meet
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks.